Last night, senators voted to speed up the passage of the bipartisan gun control bill, meaning it could be signed into law as early as next week. The bill includes tougher background checks for buyers under 21 and implements red flag laws to remove arms from people considered a threat.
Senator Chris Murphy touted the bill, calling it the most significant piece of anti-gun violence legislation in nearly 30 years. The legislation tackles the boyfriend loophole, gives $11 billion towards the nation's mental health system, and invests $2 billion in school safety programs. Even Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell signaled his support for the bill on Tuesday, saying, quote, "Our colleagues have put together a common sense package of popular steps that will help make these horrifying incidents less likely while fully upholding the Second Amendment."
You know, even acknowledging that that's a possibility, that there is a such thing as common sense gun legislation that can help prevent tragedies like the one we saw at Uvalde, and also aren't a crucial threat to the heart of the Second Amendment, feels like a win. I feel like we're not even in that conversational space much of the time. It's presumed that anything that we do at all is, at insufficiently high risk that the Second Amendment is going to be imperiled.
Well, look, I don't think enhanced background checks infringe on the Second Amendment. That's fine, as long as you're able to eventually purchase a weapon.
I mean, they do, right? They do infringe, but as a society, we've decided that every law has pros and cons, costs, balances. Right. The First Amendment, we have defamation, we have all kinds of rules that infringe upon the First Amendment, and that's what's so frustrating is that we have these binary conversations as though they're, constitutional protections are absolute in a way that we don't treat them in any other context.
That's almost a tautology, though, because
for
defamation doesn't infringe on the First Amendment because the Supreme Court has said it doesn't. Right.
Well, it is tautological, and it also speaks to how an activist court just decides what it's going to decide. A lot of liberals right now are very frustrated about a case that came down earlier this week that seems to show complete and utter disregard for the Establishment Clause. It has to do with religious school funding.
All right, we're going to talk about that later in the show. We are going to disagree very much on that one. I am a little concerned with some of the red flag stuff. We've talked about it a lot on the show. I think there's so Governor Tom Wolf of Pennsylvania tweeted this little infographic on how red flag laws work, and it has a person, Jane, and then Jane is supposed to she sees Randy, a social media contact, post photos of guns and cryptic messages. Jane calls the police to report the posts. The police petition in court to temporarily remove Randy's guns. Police provide evidence, and then the court takes away Randy's guns. So the inciting incident there is he posts photos of guns and cryptic messages. So that is, now we're violating the Second Amendment and the First Amendment because it's not, you don't lose your rights for posting cryptic messages. What does that even mean? Well,
that's a cartoon infographic and not necessarily
Well, I know, but this is what here's what a governor of a blue state thinks should be the standard.
Sure, but I think that when you look to the red flag laws that have been implemented in 19 states and the District of Columbia, most of which have been implemented without a lot of fanfare or pushback, people feel like there are sufficient due process protections in place. And to the extent that they're not, people can advocate for the laws to be changed.
Well, the Republicans are concerned that there are not sufficient due process.
Well, then they should raise examples of those that are specific and outside of the context of a graphic. But the reality is we sat here at this desk and talked at length about how frustrating it was that the FBI saw evidence that the Buffalo shooter was on a rampage. That was someone who should have eyes on them and had come to the attention of law enforcement, and yet they did nothing. And so the question is, do we believe that there is obviously a certain kind of activity that should demand closer scrutiny and others activities that aren't? There are, of course, are going to be times when that line is blurry, and I too am concerned that there could be overreaches there. But when we live in a world where we're swung far in the opposite direction, where law enforcement is made aware of potential or people, not potential bad actors, people who ultimately became bad actors, and we see in retrospect that they did nothing. It's hard for me to have that much fear about red flag laws as compared to the fear I have of actually being shot down in a grocery store.
Do you have a lot of fear about being shot down in a grocery store?
I have more fear of that than I do red flag laws, yes.
Well, okay, right. Yeah. You mean, well, you don't have guns, so you're not afraid your guns are going to be taken away. wrongly?
Well, as a Black American, to be honest, I'm pretty invested in the right to own guns. I'm not from a gun owning family, and I never personally have before, but I have been having a lot of conversations recently with my peers and other people in my life who are gun owners or veterans about going to a gun range. And so the idea that I don't currently exercise the right means that I'm not personally invested in that right, I think isn't exactly fair.
Don't you fear...
Especially given the unique history that my people have had in this country and wanting to be advocates.
No, absolutely. That's one of the main reasons I support the Second Amendment. Don't you feel that, being harassed or mistreated or unfairly targeted by the police is more likely than being in a shooting incident in the grocery store? I would think that's more likely for me, and probably even more so for you.
Yeah, I think that Black gun owners have that concern a great deal. But remember, I believe it was the issue with Philando Castile that he was licensed to carry. He had a permit, and he was shot dead in his car with his partner and her child in the back seat, regardless of warning the officer and being fully within his rights. He was really gunned down as a crime of poverty. He was only pulled over because he had so many outstanding tickets for having a broken taillight that he couldn't afford to fix because he was a chef at an elementary school, a cook at a local school. This is the country we live in. So I'm not.
It was a horrible, horrible thing, and everyone who supports Second Amendment rights, gun rights, should have condemned it. I condemned it. The NRA, I think, was a little slow on that one, and that was really a shame to see.
Yeah. So the issue isn't whether or not I think I'm indifferent to the interest of protecting the rights of gun owners. The question has to be, what is the balancing test here? What are the countervailing interests? Because it's also the case that as much as I hypothetically, or many people in fact, want to protect their full, total, maximalist access to guns at all times, there are also 19 dead children in Uvalde, Texas, and either we care about preventing those kinds of things going forward, or we don't. We care about the dead people in Buffalo supermarket who, again, the shooter came to the attention of the police and they did nothing, of law enforcement, and they did nothing. And we care about law enforcement being able to intervene or not. And again, even in the chart that you showed, that's a due process pathway that gets triggered by the alert.
Well, right,
that people are hauled off to jail in there.
Messages. I don't trust the government. In terms of misinformation, harassment, all these task force, all this monitoring of people who are crazy or unwell or wrong or is getting a little authoritarian and Orwellian, and officials are constantly signaling that they want more power to broadly criminalize dissent or views that they don't agree with or think are crazy, disinformation, etc. And I would worry that this would be one more item in their toolkit for doing so.
Well, look, Florida has a red flag law, Indiana, a lot of red states. So maybe it's worth looking at the wording that they use in those particular states, which the Republican legislatures in those states have not objected to.
Yeah. Well, we'll look into that more, and we'll have a little bit more Rising right after this.